Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Courtside Investor Podcast. I'm your host, the Card Boss, and happy 4th of July to my friends in the US. It's the 5th of July here in Malaysia. So, belated greeting to you guys. And as you probably can tell from the thumbnail and the title of this video, all right, it's the turn of the half year for me, and there's some new changes to my business. Not like any of you probably care, but there are some important lessons to take note of in this podcast, which I want to share with you guys, which may or may not impact some of you, but definitely for those who are aspiring to do business, such as myself, would probably get some lessons out of this. And I think that's a good thing to pick up on. So as you probably can tell, I've worked with Fanatics Collect heavily in the past 6 months. I've been working with these guys for a number of years, and if you guys follow my channel, I got a bit of a love-hate relationship with Fanatics Collect or PWCC in the past. So just to give you guys some context, when I first started getting very heavy into the hobby during the pandemic, like what most of us did, I was predominantly eBay. And when Fanatics Collect or PWCC back then offered a service, the vaulting service, of which you can list on eBay, kind of changed the game a bit for me, whereby I didn't need to ship the cards all the way from the US to Malaysia. I just have to do a domestic shipping, which saved cost and time, and could list on eBay as well. Easy stuff. But of course, you guys know that, PWCC got kicked out of eBay, and then for a short period of time, they had nowhere to move the cards. So I had to bring all the cards back to Malaysia, list it myself, and then they started a platform. It needed some time to gain traction, which then they were trying to do well, and they asked me to come back, which I eventually did. Came back, and then they got bought over by Fanatics, and then there was this transition time where there was some layoffs, some staffing issues, things were getting late, fulfillment times were getting bad, so on eBay, I was still selling cards on eBay through the time still called PWCC. The fulfillment was bad. My customers wasn't getting the cards on time. There was a request of refunds. There was whole sorts of madness. Okay, of which I decided to again bring all the cards back to Malaysia. And then when things start to settle down on their side, they asked me to come back again, and which I did. And then they launched the dealer program, which asked me to get involved, which I did. Okay. And, the start of 2024 was the time where I went into cards full time. And that was the time when the dealer program went into full swing. And that was the time whereby I reckon that this was going to be the game changer for my business. And for a good 1.5 years, I've been part of that ecosystem and doing pretty all right. Okay. Of course, there are things that needed to be improved, which I'm going to touch on in this video as well. But through certain incidences and certain points whereby I was a bit frustrated, that led me down the path to this new partnership. And the partnership is with Alt. Now, this is a brand that you guys are pretty familiar with. They've been, way active in the market, and it's not a new brand. Alt's been around for a number of years, and my relationship with Alt started way back in the pandemic as well. So, for some history, right? So, I was heavy in Marvel as well during the pandemic, and when Alt first kicked off, they were heavy buying. Basically, they're going all out, spending tons of money. They raised significant amount of funds in 2021 through some VCs, about 100 million or so, and all out to do a lot of acquisitions and to grow. And grow they did. But that was the only deal that I did with Alt back then until recently. So, of course, you guys are familiar with they have the liquid auctions. They've been selling record prices, okay? The interfaces are pretty much the same with Goldin, with Fanatics Collect. But one thing that Fanatics Collect always stood higher compared to Alt or Goldin was the dealer program that offered very competitive fees. And I shared this a bunch of times on my channel, whereby, I pay close to just 4.8% seller fees, okay, which is approximately, PayPal goods and services compared to, eBay, which is like 13 to 15%, compared to, let's say, like Alt initially at about 9 to 11%, Goldin as well. So all of these, Fanatics Collect set themselves kind of like a different league for me, whereby it's very efficient for my business. But there was some little chinks to the armor, all right, for my relationship with Fanatics Collect, such as cards were getting late curation, right? Things were getting slow to upload into the vault. And of course, payments, things get paid in the end, but sometimes, the payment default rates are getting up. Previously, it was 100% clear, and then slowly it was a 1-2%, and then increased to about 10%. And then the payment, delays in payment. I used to get paid within like 3 to 4 days, and then it stretched up to 2 weeks, and then it became a default. Now, all these are perhaps not of the fault of Fanatics Collect directly. It could be just the customer themselves are not paying up, or they're being bidding happy or whatever. Of course, they have apparently, according to them, have some safeguards in place to try to minimize all of that. But again, all these are just frustrations of my business because it's all about timing, efficiency, fast moving. Cash flows is the key. And I talked about this many, many times. Cash flow is the key. And all these are just major disruptions to my business. Now, let's talk a bit about Alt, okay, and the business. So Alt, it's pretty much the same. Right, they do offer the vaulting service. They do offer the weekly auctions, and they call it liquid auctions. Okay, and they have competitive rates. Now, one thing that has changed the game for them is they're offering the Alt Rewards program, which is pretty much as similar as the Fanatics Collect dealer program, and the rates are similar as well. 4.83% on the highest tier, which is the black tier. All right, so if I'm on the dealer program, which is the platinum tier for Fanatics Collect, and if I'm on the black tier for Alt, it's pretty much the same whenever I sell the cards. And of course, the market visibility for both seems to be pretty competitive at the moment. Fanatics Collect was a bit higher than Alt, but Alt seems to be catching up. And between the three, Goldin, Alt, and Fanatics Collect, they do have their strengths and weaknesses for each. But generally, for the cards that I want to sell, both platforms works well. Okay, so it's more about what are the key differences between the two that made me shift from Fanatics Collect to Alt. Okay. Now, Alt offers something that they've been promoting a long time in the market, which is cash advance. Okay, you talk about it, giving you cash immediately for cards that's being locked to the liquid auctions. If you go to the shows where Alt's present, you can just get cards, give your cards to them, and they pay you cash on the spot to spend on the show. Pretty awesome stuff, right? But even for online, right? So if I have a bunch of cards and want to do a submission, they will do an estimate, right? And they give you a quote, and they tell you, look, this is how much cash we're going to give you in advance. You can accept the quote, pay your cash straight to your account, and the cards will go for listing. So, and you can use the cash to either buy more stuff on Alt, you can redraw the money to go and buy stuff elsewhere. So it works about the same. And that reminds me of a business concept that I used to work with in the past, which is really very important as well. So in the company that I used to work with, we used to do corporate finance, and one of the companies that we acquired did flash sales of pre-loved luxury handbags, right? So the Hermes, the Birkins, the Pradas, right? So the business model is pretty simple. So we had or customers who wanted to sell their pre-loved bags, right? They brought up to us. We did an assessment. We did a rough estimate on the value, appraised it, checked whether it's authentic, and gave a value. And we gave them basically 50 to 70% of the value cash upfront. We would then list the bags on the website, sell it to direct customers if there was the direct demands, or perhaps find a way to move the stuff. Okay. Now, whether is it on the appraised value or on higher value, it depends on us. But end of the day, if the value was higher than what the original amount that we gave to the client, okay, which was around 50 to 70%, okay, we would take a cut of the upside, and the client will also get a portion of the upside. So it was kind of like a win-win situation overall. From the client's point of view, they moved something that they no longer wanted, they get some money in front, and they had a bit of a share on the potential upside without doing any of the work. Okay. Now, you probably think this sounds a bit familiar, and that's exactly how Alt's business concept is. So if you bring if you're just a regular collector, I'm not talking about business for the time being, if you're just a collector, you have a car that you didn't want anymore, you could bring up to Alt, appraise the value, give you cash up front, and then put it on the auction, depending what it closed for, okay, and you get a cut on the upside or the auction value, the difference between what it closed for, less the fees, against whatever you have received. cool stuff to you, it's perfect. Get some money to spend right now, and maybe in a couple of weeks, get a little bit of money extra on the top most of the time, right? Perfect sense. Now, from a business perspective, this is extremely, extremely valuable. Okay, and I talk about cash flows in the start of this video, how important cash flow is. So if you were to put in, let's say 20 or 30,000 in inventory, to put up for sale, you have to wait for the auction to be over. Maybe let's say call it from the time that you drop the inventory into the vault, it takes a curation time. On average, let's say it's 5 business days. Then it goes up for listing, depending on, let's say if in Fanatics Collect, it lists every Sunday. So if you happen to drop it off on a Wednesday or Thursday, it doesn't make it till the following week. And therefore, you have to wait a further 1 more week before it gets listed. So all in all, from the point in time that you actually drop off or you submit the cards into the vault to the point that it's actually been sold, it could be roughly between as long as 2.5 weeks. And then you have to wait a further maybe 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the buyer itself, to get the payment. And all in all, should there be no defaults, you probably get paid within 1 month. So that's assuming that, everything's smooth. There could be some delays, hiccups, whatever. Okay. But $30,000 gets locked up for about 2 months. Okay, for about a whole month before you finally see some return. Now, imagine a situation whereby you send the same $30,000. Okay, they do an appraisal and they tell you, okay, right, you're going to appraise this for about maybe 21,000. Okay, 70% of the value, just hypothetical example, and they give you 21,000 cash in front. Now, whatever the upside is on the auction, okay, it's going to be minus fees, and then you get a share. It could end at 35, it could end at 40, it could end at 28, whatever it is. Okay, minus fees, and then you get the difference between that and the 21. But what's important is if you're running this as a business, obviously you're going around and buy cards at a particular price. Most of the times the general concept, 70% of comps or 80% of comps. So what that means is the lot that you have sent to own, all right, 30,000 value, right? You probably paid close to maybe, let's say 20, 22. You give yourself 24, 25, okay, with a 5K upside in terms of profit before fees. But what actually happens is Alt will pay you first of that. And same example, 21,000 of that, let's say 25K paid in front. So you are guaranteed a 21K back in your pocket with a 4K outlay, okay, to potentially make another, let's say 3 to 4K. And that's pretty awesome compared to the example I showed or I illustrated earlier, whereby you put 30,000 in front or 20 odd thousand in front, okay, you got to wait a full month before you see the return on your entire lot. Whereas this is essentially you're rolling $4,000 or $5,000, okay, to make another $4,000 or $5,000. Okay, it doesn't matter because you've got a significant chunk of your capital back. And I think if you keep on doing this, when you buy that, you get that 21K, you can go out and buy another 21K worth of inventory and keep rinse and repeat. So this is the value proposition that all offered. And moreover, you could have done this much earlier, but why no one has actually done it, or why I haven't done it in the past 6 months, is because of the fees. Like I mentioned before, all fees were pretty much, roughly what market fees was, but the Fanatics Collect dealer program fees set it apart. That difference between 4.83% and 9%, or the difference of 4%, is a big deal. So if you're selling, $10,000 worth of cards, that's extra $400 in your pocket. It's a big amount of money. So when they introduce the rewards program and you get yourself into the black tier as quick as possible, okay, that's pretty much solved in terms of fees, and you get that engine rolling really, really quick. The snowball effect is really, really quick. And that's essentially where I am today. Okay. So my advice for you guys running a business, if you guys, trying to think about this, how does an announcement or rewards program potentially can affect, this is the game changer for you guys. Okay. So that's pretty much what my business is heading to. Basically, I appreciate all the time that I did with Fanatics Collect. We did about $400,000 of revenue for the first 5 months of this year, 2025, and roughly about 65K for the month of June. I'm going to do a recap on that sales data for the month of June. But It's a bit low due to a couple of reasons. Number one, because of the transitioning between Fanatics Collect to Alt, whereby I needed to move some of the inventory, which is supposedly for Fanatics Collect, to move over to Alt, in order for me to chase the black tier as quick as possible, as well as planning to curate some inventory for the Macau show. So been busy on that front. So, but I want to just do this video just to share with you guys on not just about what I'm doing, but potentially for some of you guys, may get some benefit to consider this. I'm not backed by Alt. I'm not being don't get any promotion money from Alt, but it's just sharing my experience on the service and being on a black tier as well. You get a bit of other benefits aside from the rates. Okay, you definitely get a faster customer service. You don't get any fulfillment fee when you do any shipping out. Okay, and of course, there's one thing, it's an invitation to all events, which I'm not sure how is that going to happen for me being halfway across around the world, but that's all good. But for the time being, we're right now, we're just on the start of July. It's my first couple of weeks on the service. I'm pretty happy with the customer support this far, and I'm gonna see where does this road take me. All right, that's it for the sharing of this one. I hope you guys got something valuable on this insight on this transition between Fanatics Collect, and I hope you guys got something out of this. All right, like, subscribe, and follow my channel if you enjoy this kind of content, more business and finance related, and of course, sports cards. Thanks for watching, guys. Cowboys out.